Hey everyone, welcome back today. We're diving into something pretty fascinating. The rise and fall of empires.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be looking at Ray Dalio's Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order YouTube video. To understand the patterns of history
Mm.
and what they might mean for us, for the future.
Right.
Ever get that feeling like history is just repeating itself?
Yeah.
Well, Dalio thinks there's a big cycle at play. And get this, he believes we can actually learn from it to navigate the challenges of today.
That's right. And Dalio's interest in these cycles came from a pretty dramatic personal experience.
Mm.
Imagine you're a young clerk on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange in 1971. Suddenly, the U.S. announces it can no longer exchange dollars for gold.
Whoa.
That's exactly
Yeah.
what happened to Dalio. And it sparked a lifelong fascination with understanding these massive shifts in power.
Okay, so the U.S. basically ran out of money. And that got Dalio thinking about empires.
Precisely. It sent him on a quest to study the rise and fall of empires throughout history. What he found is that they tend to follow a similar pattern, a big cycle. That lasts roughly 250 years. He saw it with the Dutch, the British, and even the U.S.
So this isn't just ancient history. Dalio is saying this cycle could be happening right now. That's a bit unsettling, wouldn't you say?
It definitely makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty of decline, let's unpack what actually makes an empire in the first place. Dalio outlines 4 key ingredients: winning and consolidating power, establishing effective systems and institutions,
Okay.
building wealth and power, and ensuring a smooth transition of power to capable successors.
Sounds simple, right? But I have a feeling it's way more complicated than that.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the Dutch Empire. They were pioneers of modern capitalism and even created the first stock market. They built their wealth on trade and innovation. And then you have the British Empire, with its vast network of colonies, and the powerful East India Company that controlled a huge chunk of global trade. And of course, there's the U.S., which rose to dominance through its industrial might and military power, what we often call the military-industrial complex.
Right.
Each empire had its own unique formula for success.
It's mind-blowing to think about how much power these empires wielded. But as we know, even the mightiest empires eventually crumble. What causes this shift from dominance to decline? Is it like watching a building slowly decay until it collapses?
It's a fascinating process, and it often starts with the very strengths that propelled the empire to greatness in the first place. For example, as an empire gets richer, its people might start earning more,
Okay.
leading to higher costs, and a decline in competitiveness. This can make it harder for them to compete on the global stage.
So being successful can actually make you less successful in the long run? That's almost counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And there's another subtle shift that Dalio observed. In the later stages of an empire, the focus tends to move from making wealth to taking it.
Interesting.
This can manifest in all sorts of ways, from political maneuvering to financial speculation.
That makes sense. If you're no longer the most competitive, you might be tempted to find other ways to maintain your position. But wouldn't that create tension within the empire itself?
Absolutely. And that internal pressure is one of the key factors
Yeah.
that can contribute to an empire's downfall. Think about it. Rising costs, growing wealth gaps, over-reliance on borrowing. These issues can lead to social unrest and instability.
And it sounds like that's exactly what Dalio sees happening in some parts of the world today.
Yes, he's particularly concerned about the rise of populism and the potential threats it poses to democracy, especially during times of economic hardship and political polarization.
That's a sobering thought. But if an empire is already struggling with internal issues, wouldn't that make it even more vulnerable to challenges from the outside?
You're right on the money. A weakened empire can become a prime target for ambitious rivals, looking to assert their own dominance. And here's where it gets really interesting. Dalio argues that declining empires often face a difficult choice. They can either fight back against a rising power, risking a catastrophic loss, or they can retreat, appearing weak and inviting further challenges. It's a classic catch-22.
So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. That doesn't sound like a winning formula.
It rarely is.
Yeah.
And we may be seeing this dynamic play out right now in the rivalry between the U.S. and China.
It's almost as if history is rhyming, as Mark Twain supposedly said. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've talked about how empires rise and the cracks that start to appear. But what happens when an empire finally reaches the breaking point? How does the cycle actually end?
Well, typically the end game involves a financial collapse. The empire loses its status as the world's reserve currency. Think of it like the currency that everyone wants to hold and use for international trade. This loss of economic power further weakens the empire, leading to a shift in the global balance of power.
So are we saying that the US dollar could lose its dominance? Is that what Dalio is suggesting?
Dalio does point out that the U.S. is exhibiting many of the classic symptoms of decline, including massive debt, overspending, and internal conflict.
Uh-oh.
But he also emphasizes that it's not a foregone conclusion.
Okay, so there's still hope. Maybe the US can turn things around. But if history is any guide, it's not going to be easy.
That's the big question, isn't it? Can the U.S. defy the historical pattern? It's like watching a movie where you know the ending is coming, but you're still hoping for a plot twist. And Dalio, being a student of history, doesn't give us a simple yes or no answer. He believes in understanding the patterns, not predicting the future with absolute certainty, but he does offer some clues, some key insights that might help us navigate this uncertain terrain.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are these clues? How can we understand what's happening right now? Through the lens of Dalio's big cycle.
Well, Dalio argues that empires rise because they create systems that incentivize their people to make wealth.
Okay.
Think innovation, hard work, building things of value. But as empires mature, they often transition towards systems that encourage taking wealth. This could involve political maneuvering, financial manipulation, or even outright exploitation. And this shift, he suggests, is a key factor in their decline.
So it's not just about how much wealth an empire has, but how that wealth is created and distributed.
Exactly. And this brings us back to those internal conflicts we talked about earlier. Remember, Dalio warns about the dangers of widening wealth gaps and the social unrest that often follows. When people feel like the system is rigged against them, they're more likely to turn against each other.
That makes perfect sense. It's like a pressure cooker waiting to explode. It can feel a bit overwhelming to think about how these cycles play out. It's like humanity is trapped in this endless loop of building and destroying.
I understand that feeling. It can be daunting to look at history and see these patterns repeating themselves. But Dalio's point isn't to make us feel hopeless. It's actually the opposite.
Okay.
He believes that by understanding these patterns, we can make better decisions and potentially even alter the course of history.
That's a much more empowering way to think about it. So what does Dalio suggest we do? How can we break free from this cycle? Or at least navigate it more skillfully?
He argues that it all boils down to two fundamental principles: earning more than we spend and treating each other well.
Wait, that's it? That's all it takes to build a lasting empire? Or to avoid a devastating collapse?
It's deceptively simple. Think about it. Earning more than you spend requires discipline,
Okay.
innovation, and a focus on long-term sustainability. These are always qualities that societies prioritize. And then there's the human element. Treating each other well requires empathy, fairness, and a willingness to share power. These are qualities that can be especially challenging to maintain when people are struggling or feeling threatened.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these two principles connect to everything else we've been discussing. Education, innovation, competitiveness, even military strength. These are all tools that can help us achieve those two core goals of economic stability and social harmony.
You're exactly right. And Dalio reminds us that it's not just about individual choices, but also about the systems and institutions we create. We need to build societies that encourage responsible behavior, both economically and socially.
So where do we go from here? How do we even begin to tackle these massive challenges?
Dalio suggests that we start by paying attention to the vital signs of our nations.
Okay.
Are we investing in education? Are we fostering innovation? Are we managing our finances responsibly? And perhaps most importantly, are we treating each other with respect and dignity? These are the questions we need to be asking ourselves, both individually and collectively.
Those are some deep questions, and I have a feeling they don't have easy answers. It feels like we've only just begun to scratch the surface of this complex topic.
We have. But that's the whole point of this deep dive, right?
Right.
To get us thinking critically about these issues and to encourage us to explore them further.
And remember, action can take many forms. It's not just about voting or running for office. It can be as simple as educating ourselves, having meaningful conversations with others, or even just making more conscious choices in our own lives. Small actions can create ripples.
Exactly. And you know what's interesting? We started this deep dive talking about the rise and fall of empires, these grand historical forces that seem almost beyond our control. But really, this is about the choices we make, both individually and collectively. Those choices determine not just the fate of nations, but the future of humanity as a whole.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. That's perhaps the most important takeaway from Dalio's work. It's a call to action, a reminder that we have the power to shape our destiny. even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges.
Absolutely. And, it's not just about surviving these cycles, but about thriving in the face of them. We can use this knowledge to make better decisions, to create a more just and equitable world.
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. The big cycle, the key factors that contribute to an empire's rise and fall, and the importance of earning more than we spend, and treating each other well. We even touched upon the warning signs that Dalio highlights, those vital signs that might indicate whether a nation is on a sustainable path. But Dalio's video doesn't just offer a diagnosis. It hints at potential solutions. He challenges us to improve our vital signs, to actively work towards a better future. We've got a lot to unpack here, but we're out of time for this part of our deep dive.
He certainly does. Dalio's message is one of empowerment, not despair. He's saying that we're not just passive passengers on this historical roller coaster.
Right.
We have the power to influence the ride. It's not about throwing our hands up in despair. It's about rolling up our sleeves and getting to work. Because ultimately, the future isn't predetermined. It's shaped by the choices we make today.
And that brings us back to Dalio's core argument. He's not trying to predict the future with absolute certainty. He's giving us a framework to understand the forces at play, so we can make more informed decisions both as individuals and as a society.
Exactly. That's the beauty of studying history. It gives us a wider lens, helps us spot patterns that we might otherwise miss, and hopefully that awareness empowers us to break free from those destructive cycles, or at least to navigate them more skillfully.
So let's say we buy into Dalio's framework. Let's say these cycles are real, and we're currently in the midst of a major shift in the global order. What does that mean for us on a practical level? It's one thing to talk about empires and cycles in the abstract, but how can we apply these insights to our own lives?
Well, I think Dalio would say it starts with personal responsibility. We need to focus on our own vital signs, just like you talked about on a national level. Are we investing in our own education and development? Are we managing our finances responsibly? Are we contributing to our communities in a positive way?
And I love that idea, thinking about our lives in terms of vital signs. It's such a great way to connect these big, complex issues to our everyday choices. It makes it feel more tangible, more actionable.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, change happens from the bottom up. It starts with individuals making conscious choices.
Yeah.
And those choices ripple outward, influencing families, communities, and eventually even entire nations.
It makes you think about the butterfly effect, right? How our seemingly small actions can actually have a huge impact on the world around us. It can be pretty inspiring when you think about it that way.
It really is. And it brings to mind another key point that Dalio makes in his video.
Yeah.
Remember when he talked about how empires decline
Yes.
when they shift from making wealth to taking wealth?
That was a powerful insight. It made me think about how we often reward those who are good at taking, whether it's in business politics or even our personal lives.
It's a pervasive pattern, isn't it? And I think it applies to us as individuals as well. Are we focused on creating value, on contributing something positive to the world? Or are we primarily concerned with getting ahead, even if it means stepping on others?
Yeah.
That's a question we all need to ask ourselves.
That's a really thought-provoking question. It's so easy to get caught up in the rat race and forget about the bigger picture, isn't it?
It is. But Dalio's work reminds us that true success isn't just about individual achievement. It's about creating a better world for everyone.
I love that. It's not just about winning the game. It's about making sure the game is fair and that everyone has a chance to play. So if we want to break free from these cycles of decline, or at least navigate them more skillfully, we need to start by asking ourselves some tough questions. Are we living in a way that's sustainable, both for ourselves and for the planet? Are we treating each other with kindness and respect? Are we contributing to something larger than ourselves?
Those are the questions that really matter, aren't they? And I think Dalio would agree that finding the answers is the key to creating a more just equitable and ultimately more prosperous future for all of us. It's not about finding a perfect solution, but about constantly striving to improve, to learn from our mistakes, and to evolve.
And it's about recognizing that we're all in this together, right? We can't just focus on our own individual success. We need to work together to create a system that benefits everyone. It's like we're all players on the same team, even if we sometimes forget that.
That's a beautiful way to put it. We're all interconnected, and our actions have ripple effects. We can choose to create ripples of kindness, compassion, and generosity. Or we can create ripples of selfishness, greed, and destruction. The choice is ultimately ours.
It's both empowering and a bit daunting to realize how much power we actually have. It's not just about waiting for leaders to fix things, it's about taking responsibility for our own actions and contributing to positive change in whatever ways we can.
Exactly. And, it's interesting to consider how Dalio's framework applies not just to nations, but to other systems as well.
Okay.
Think about companies, organizations, even families. They all go through cycles of growth, maturity, and decline. And the same principles apply. Are they focused on creating value or extracting it? Are they treating their members fairly and with respect? Are they adapting to changing circumstances?
That's fascinating. I had never thought about applying these ideas to smaller scale systems. But it makes perfect sense. It's like a fractal pattern, the same dynamics playing out at different levels of complexity. And it makes you realize that we can learn from these cycles no matter what role we play in society, whether we're running a country, leading a company, or simply trying to live a good life.
You've hit the nail on the head. Dalio's work offers a powerful framework for understanding not just the world around us, but also our own lives and the choices we make every day.
So, what are some concrete steps we can take to apply these insights? We've talked about the big picture, but how can we translate these ideas into actionable advice for our listeners?
That's a great question. I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
We need to be conscious of the cycles at play, both in the world and in our own lives. We need to ask ourselves those tough questions about how we're creating value, how we're treating others, and how we're contributing to the greater good.
Okay, so awareness is the first step. But what comes next? How do we move from awareness to action?
Well, I think it's helpful to think about Dalio's two core principles, earning more than we spend and treating each other well. How can we apply those principles to our own lives?
Right.
Maybe it means focusing on our financial literacy, learning new skills or starting a side hustle to increase our earning potential. Maybe it means being more mindful of our spending habits and making sure we're not living beyond our means.
And on the treating each other well side of things, maybe it means being more kind and compassionate in our interactions with others. Maybe it means volunteering our time or donating to causes we care about. Maybe it means simply being a good friend, family member, or neighbor.
You're exactly right. It's about finding ways to embody those principles in our everyday lives, both in big ways and small. And it's about remembering that every action, every choice has a ripple effect. We can choose to create ripples of positivity, or we can create ripples of negativity. The choice is ours.
I love that imagery. It's a reminder that we're not powerless. We have agency. And even if we can't control the big cycles of history, we can control how we respond to them. We can choose to be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Precisely. And, it's interesting to think about how Dalio's framework relates to the concept of resilience.
Okay.
Empires that are able to adapt, to learn from their mistakes, and to evolve tend to be more resilient in the face of challenges. And the same is true for individuals. The more we cultivate those qualities of adaptability, learning, and personal growth, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the inevitable ups and downs of life.
That's such an important point. It's not about avoiding challenges altogether. It's about developing the skills and mindset to overcome them. It's about being anti-fragile, as Nassim Taleb would say.
Exactly. And, one of the things that Dalio emphasizes is the importance of having a long-term perspective.
Okay.
He argues that we often get caught up in short-term thinking, focusing on immediate gratification rather than long-term sustainability.
That's so true. We live in a world that's obsessed with instant gratification. Whether it's social media, fast food, or get-rich-quick schemes, it's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture. But if we want to build a better future for ourselves and for generations to come, we need to start thinking about the long game.
Absolutely. We need to ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to leave behind? What legacy do we want to create? And then we need to start making choices that align with those long-term goals, even if it means sacrificing some short-term comfort or convenience.
I think that's a great place to wrap up this part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from the big cycle of empires to the importance of personal responsibility, from the power of awareness to the need for long-term thinking. But before we move on to the final part of our discussion, I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder.
I'm intrigued. What's the question?
If you could design a society that was truly resilient, sustainable, and equitable, what would it look like? What values would it be based on? What systems and institutions would it have in place? Take some time to reflect on those questions, and we'll pick up this thread in the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Ray Dalio's Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. We've been exploring his big cycle theory, how empires rise and fall,
Right.
and what we can learn from these patterns. To navigate the complexities of the world today,
Yeah.
you've heard us talk about personal responsibility, the need for long-term thinking, and even building resilience on a personal and societal level.
It's a lot to take in,
Yeah.
but hopefully it sparks some interesting thoughts. And maybe even a few aha moments. Remember, Dalio isn't trying to paint a bleak picture.
Right.
He's offering a framework for understanding the challenges we face and empowering us to make a difference. Exactly. It's about taking that knowledge and turning it into positive action. And in this last part of our deep dive, we want to zoom in on that question. What can we actually do with this information?
Well, we left you with a pretty big question to ponder.
Hmm.
What would a truly resilient, sustainable, and equitable society look like?
Yeah.
Did you have a chance to think about that?
I did, and it really got me thinking about the power of imagination. We often get so caught up in the problems of the present that we forget to envision a better future. But that act of imagining, of dreaming big, is the first step towards creating something new.
I completely agree. It's like planting a seed in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have a clear vision of what you want to create, it becomes much easier to start taking steps in that direction.
So let's say we've got this vision in our minds. What are some concrete actions we can take to move closer to that ideal?
Well, I think it goes back to those two fundamental principles that Dalio talks about, earning more than we spend
Yeah.
and treating each other well.
Mhm.
These principles can guide our actions on a personal level, but they can also inform the choices we make as a society.
Okay, so on a personal level, earning more could mean investing in our education, developing valuable skills, or finding creative ways to generate income. And spending less could mean being more mindful of our consumption habits, making sustainable choices, and prioritizing experiences over material possessions.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between financial well-being
Mm.
and living a life that's aligned with our values. And remember, it's not just about individual wealth, it's about creating a system that allows everyone to thrive.
And on the treating each other well front, it's about building relationships based on empathy, compassion, and respect. It's about supporting our communities, standing up for what's right, and advocating for those who are marginalized or disadvantaged.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity and understanding that our individual well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of others. We can't truly thrive in a world where others are suffering.
That's so powerful. And it makes me think about the importance of education, not just in the traditional sense of going to school and getting a degree,
Yeah.
but in the broader sense of lifelong learning, of staying curious, of challenging our assumptions, and of being open to new ideas.
Education is the key to breaking free from those limiting beliefs and behaviors that keep us stuck in cycles of decline. It's about empowering ourselves with the knowledge and skills we need to create a better world.
And it's about fostering critical thinking, right? Being able to analyze information, evaluate different perspectives, and make informed decisions. We
Right.
live in a world that's saturated with information, and it's more important than ever to be able to discern truth from falsehood, to separate fact from opinion.
Absolutely. We need to be savvy consumers of information,
Yeah.
not just passive recipients. We need to be willing to question authority, to challenge the status quo, and to think for ourselves.
It sounds like Dalio's work is as much about personal transformation as it is about societal change.
It's both, really. They're interconnected. The more we embody those principles of responsibility, integrity, and compassion in our own lives, the more we contribute to creating a world where those values flourish.
So if we want to see real change in the world, we need to start by looking inward. We need to ask ourselves those tough questions about how we're living, how we're treating others, and what kind of legacy we want to leave behind.
And we need to be willing to step outside our comfort zones, to challenge our assumptions, and to embrace new ways of thinking and being. It's not always easy, but it's essential if we want to create a future that's worthy of our highest aspirations.
It's inspiring, but it can also feel daunting, right?
Yeah,
Where do we even begin?
I think it starts with small steps. What's one thing you can do today, right now, to embody those principles of earning more, spending less, and treating others well?
Yeah.
Maybe it's having an honest conversation with a loved one, volunteering your time at a local charity, or simply making a conscious effort to be more kind and compassionate in your interactions with others.
It's about taking those small steps consistently, building momentum, and inspiring others to do the same.
Exactly. It's about creating a ripple effect of positive change that spreads outwards, transforming individuals, communities, and ultimately the world. And remember, you're not alone in this journey. There are countless others who share your values and are working towards the same goals. Connect with them, support each other, and let's create that better future together.
Well said. That feels like the perfect note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but we've only just scratched the surface of Ray Dalio's principles for dealing with the changing world order. We encourage you to explore his work further, to challenge his ideas, to form your own opinions, and most importantly, to take action.
The future is not predetermined. It's shaped by the choices we make every day. So let's choose wisely, let's act with courage and compassion, and let's create a world that's worthy of the empires we build.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it thought-provoking and inspiring. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please share your reflections and insights on our social media pages. Until next time, keep diving deep.